Okay, one of the most tedious bits of code that we can write is to write mapping code between one object, like our app user, into another object, like our member DTO. And we can do this manually. And if I went to my user controller and I said, okay, instead of returning an app user, I want to return a member DTO, for example, then obviously we get a warning down here. And I could say, okay, I'm going to return a new member DTO. And now I need to go inside this object and effectively map every property from one to the other. So for example, I'd say ID equals user.id. And then I'd go to known as and say this is equal to user.known as. And then I'd go through and do this for every property inside the app user class that we have inside our member DTO class. And that is no fun. Of that I can assure you. So there is a tool out there, and we'll make use of that to do this tedious mapping job for us. And the tool that we're going to use is AutoMapper. Now earlier on I had an issue with NuGet Gallery, and I feel like a complete idiot now because I investigated. I was like, why is this not working? Because it was working, but then I thought maybe I need to install a different version. And I went to install a different version, and I was like, aha, version 1.0.0 3 days ago. It's been on version 0.0.24 for 3 years now. And as I'm recording 3 days ago, it seems it's had an update and it's now released rather than being in preview. And I had a look at the how to use, and it looks like this is in a different place, and sure enough it is. So rather than using the command palette now to make use of NuGet Gallery, instead we open up, well, if we go to our terminal, we actually have a tab on here now for NuGet. And that's not a good sign, so let's just click that refresh button. Okay, it does work fine. So this is how we use NuGet now. And I'll have had to go back and update earlier lessons that I've already recorded to point out this is where we use NuGet Gallery now. So anyway, what we're going to use is AutoMapper. And let's search for this. And we want to get this, effectively. Version 13 works fine. If we were using something earlier than version 13, or we needed to use earlier than version 13, then there's a specific one for dependency injection. But as from version 13 onwards, then we're going to use this one. We are going to use dependency injection, and let's go ahead and install this one. So this is the first time I've actually used this gallery. So we just use the plus button, I presume, to go ahead and install this into our API project. And I have to say, this is a much better experience in version 1.0 of this tool than it was in the pre-release versions. And you may not want to check this box actually, because this is going to give you all of the pre-release packages rather than the released and stable packages. So up to you, I guess, but I would suggest not using pre-release versions of something you've not used before until you know for sure the stable and working version is working for you. So let's go and set up AutoMapper then. And the way that we use this, we set up AutoMapper profiles, and we effectively tell it what we want to map from in the case of the app user and what we want it to map to. And inside our Solution Explorer, let's right click the API folder and we'll create another new folder, and I'm just going to call it helpers for helper code. And inside the helpers folder, I'm going to right click and say add new file, select class, and I'm going to say AutoMapper profiles as the name of this class. And inside here, let's first of all close the others whilst we're working on this, and I'm going to set the namespace to API helpers. Now the AutoMapper profiles we need to derive from an AutoMapper class, and we derive from a class called profile. And make sure you get this from AutoMapper, and we've got the using statement at the top here as well. Now inside here we need to create a constructor. So we use CTOR to get the constructor snippet, and we don't need any parameters for this. But inside this constructor, we effectively create our mapping profile. So I'm going to say create map, and we tell AutoMapper where we want to go from, and we need to go from our app user, and we need to go to our member DTO. And then we just add parentheses. And then we also need to do one for our photo as well, and go from the photo entity, so we'll say photo, and we're going to the photo DTO. And that is it. Now the way that AutoMapper works, if I go to my app user and I also open up the member DTO, the way that this works, if I can split this, is that any of these properties that match the name, so if we've got the int ID here and we've got an int ID in the member DTO, AutoMapper's got no problem with that. And actually, for the username, I've got the username in uppercase N here. For the username, I actually want this to be username in lowercase, with the name part in lowercase. AutoMapper is also fine with this as well. It will presume, if we've got a username like this casing, and this casing over here, it's going to presume that's what we want. Now for the age property, because inside here we've got a method called getAge, and age matches the name of the property over here, and get is called get, then it's going to populate that and use this extension method to populate the age property that we have there as well. Now for things like this photo URL, well, AutoMapper doesn't know about this, and we will need to configure it, but we'll see how far we get with what AutoMapper can do all by itself, and then if we do need to give it a bit more help, then we'll go and configure it soon. So now that's the system that we're going to use, and it does save us from typing out that tedious mapping code, but we need to set this up as a service so that we can inject it. So let's open up our application service extensions, and we're just going to add another service, so services, and we're going to say add AutoMapper. And we need to tell AutoMapper where to find our code effectively. And inside our AutoMapper profiles, because we're deriving from profile, we can have mapping profiles littered all around our code, but as long as they're deriving from profile, then AutoMapper, when our application starts up, is going to register these different profiles for anything that derives from its profile class. So inside the parameters here, we need to tell this where to find our code, and a quick and easy way to do that is to say app domain and current domain and get assemblies. And this will look inside our assembly, our API assembly, and register all of those profiles that we're creating. So now we've set it up, next we'll take a look at how we can use it.